Okay, thank you. How are you? Nice live shot. Good to see all of you. Happy Friday. It's great to be back with you. Earlier this week in the East Room, the president proudly signed the Laken-Riley Act into law, surrounded by Laken's loving parents and sister. This common sense bipartisan law mandates the federal detention of illegal aliens who are accused of theft, burglary, assaulting a law enforcement officer, and any crime that causes death or serious bodily injury, like the animal who murdered Laken-Riley in cold blood. This was the first piece of legislation President Trump proudly signed as the 47th president of the United States, and it will guarantee that Laken did not die in vain. As Laken's mother, Allison, tearfully said during the signing event, President Trump said he would secure our borders and that he would never forget about Laken, and he hasn't. He's a man of his word, and we trust that he will fight for the American people. Those are the words of Laken's mother, and we will never forget them. So to help lock up even more criminal illegal aliens, President Trump signed a memorandum this week to detain them at Guantanamo Bay. This action will expand the Migrant Operations Center at Naval Station Guantanamo Bay to full capacity to provide critical extra detention space for high-priority criminal illegals. Our brave ICE agents continue to arrest more and more of these types of individuals every day in communities across our country. And I have more updates for you. On January 27th, 2025, ICE Chicago arrested a citizen of Guatemala who has been convicted of solicitation to meet a child, disturbing, and sentenced to 24 months probation. On January 28th, 2025, ICE Atlanta arrested a citizen of South Korea who has been convicted of 9 counts of possession or control of material depicting minors in sexually explicit conduct. On January 28th, ICE New York arrested a Mexican national previously charged by the state of New York for attempted murder and possession of a weapon and assault. And on January 28th, ICE Philly arrested a citizen of Mexico who has been convicted of possession of child pornography. Our message is simple. If you are a criminal illegal alien, you will be arrested and deported. And in lighter news, but in exciting news, after announcing our briefing room changes on Wednesday, this White House has received more than 10,000 submissions from individuals across the country who are eager to join all of you. We might have to make this room a little bit bigger to do that, who want to participate in our new media seat at a future briefing. So in this seat today, we have the Ruthless podcast. They humbly started by entertaining small audiences on Capitol Hill, but after 4 years, this program has become one of the most influential podcasts in America. They previously reached #1 on the charts and earned over 25 million downloads as they deliver political news with a humorous touch. The hosts are Josh Holmes, Michael Duncan, Comfortably Smug, and the man joining us today, John Ashbrook. So with that, I will take your questions. John, please kick us off.
Thank you very much. You know, Karoline, in your first briefing, the media went after this administration for deporting illegal immigrants they claimed were not criminals. The question is, do you think they're out of touch with Americans demanding action on our border crisis?
The media out of touch? I think the media certainly is out of touch, and I think that's proven by a number of things, John. #1, there was a New York Times poll that was released prior to President Trump's inauguration by the New York Times, which of course is a legacy media outlet, that showed that 83% of Americans support deporting the individuals that you mentioned, illegal immigrant criminals, especially those who have committed heinous crimes in the interior of our country. And I received a very actually interesting statistic on this front from ICE this week. 97% of the deportations that this administration has made thus far are of individuals who had a removal order from the previous administration, but were never removed from the interior of our country. So this shows that the previous administration was actually defying our laws, and all this administration is doing is simply following the laws, the immigration laws of this great country. Thanks for the question, John. Anything else?
No, that's it.
Okay, great.
Guantanamo Bay, can you give more details about setting up that detention facility at Gitmo? How will that come about? What's the timing in terms of standing it up? And of course, this has happened before during the Clinton administration.
Yeah, that's right.
Detainees of Cuban and Haitian descent were both detained at Guantanamo. Are you looking at that model in setting up this detention facility?
Secretary Hegseth, I believe, was on television this morning answering this question, and he said that the Department of Defense is already on it. He has directed his agency to ensure that Gitmo is increasing their capacity for beds, and that's exactly what President Trump's executive order did. It directed Secretary Hegseth and also Secretary Noem to expand the Migrant Operations Center at the Naval Station to provide for this extra detention space. And as Secretary Hegseth confirmed this morning, that operation is underway. Sure. Daniel.
Thank you, Caroline.
You're welcome.
Back on the Guantanamo Bay subject, specifically, obviously, why does the president feel like that's the best location or a good location to make sure that Americans are safe from violent, illegal migrant crime?
Well, it's a really good question, and the memorandum that he signed, the order that he signed, builds on his previous executive actions, obviously, to secure our southern border and deport illegal criminals from the interior of our country. We know that we have an issue with detention space here in the interior, which is a big reason why Congress needs to pass this reconciliation package as quickly as possible to ensure that DHS and ICE have the funding they need to detain these individuals that the administration is very swiftly rounding up and deporting, arresting and deporting these illegal immigrant criminals. And so the president feels it's an appropriate place. Taxpayers are already funding it. The space is there. Why not use it? And the Secretary of Defense, as I said, is working on that as we speak. Sure. Yes.
Thank you so much for having me here and answering your question. So I want to talk more about the success that ICE is having finding these violent criminal aliens, some of them being sexual predators. But my friend Ben Bergquam reports that the Chicago mayor and the Illinois governor are preventing ICE agents from going into jails and prisons to enforce detainers against illegal aliens. In Maryland, the Attorney General has also put out a memo hindering local police cooperation with ICE. Does the administration have any comment on leftist state and local officials defying ICE and Trump's deportation efforts?
Yeah, I think it's very interesting that Democrat officials in these cities who have been completely overrun and overwhelmed by illegal immigrant criminals would refuse support and help to cure this problem that has especially taken over their cities. I guess they don't want to admit they've been wrong with their sanctuary city policies. I'm not sure. You'll have to ask them about their intentions, but they would be very wise to comply with this administration because this administration is hell-bent on enforcing our nation's immigration laws, and this administration will continue to arrest and detain and deport illegal migrant criminals. And what we won't do is defy our nation's immigration laws like the previous administration, who had these orders of removal on illegal immigrants across the country and were refusing to execute on them. We will continue to remove illegal criminals from our nation's interior.
Are these sanctuary city leaders, are they violating the law?
I would certainly think so. I'd have to check back on which specific law they're violating, but certainly if they're not enforcing our nation's immigration law, sounds like they are breaking the law. And I would also add that their constituents don't approve of that. You've seen residents in Chicago show up at their city council meetings infuriated with their leadership in that city because they are working very hard to provide for their families. They want public safety and law and order, and their officials have abandoned those very basic American principles in these cities. And the American people want law and order. It's, again, an overwhelmingly popular policy to deport illegal criminals from our nation's interior, and this administration will continue to affect that goal. Sure. Sure.
A question on Colombia. We just interviewed Colombian President Gustavo Petro, and he insisted that he's not going to take any Colombian deportee from the U.S. if they arrive in South America handcuffed. How this administration responds to that?
When did the Colombian president make those remarks?
Today, for
Okay.
an interview with us at Univision.
Well, I will share those with the President of the United States, and I will get back to you on his response.
As you know, under the previous administration, the U.S. recognized the opposition candidate in last year's elections, Edmundo Gonzalez, now exiled, as the legitimate president of Venezuela. Does the president's dispatching of Ambassador Granell to negotiate directly with President Maduro today mean that the U.S. now officially recognizes President Maduro as the legitimate president of Venezuela?
Absolutely not. As I made it very clear, former ambassador and now special envoy Rick Grinnell is going to Venezuela with two very clear directives. Make sure that Tren de Aragua members, of which there are 400 currently in custody, are repatriated back to Venezuela, and that all United States detainees return home.
My question is, if you could shed any light for us on how the president perceives his use of public profanity, which is a practice that certainly sets him apart from all of his predecessors. Does he regard it as an effective communications device, part of his appeal, or is it something that he lapses into inadvertently, perhaps in times of frustration and later regrets?
I think one of the things that the American people love most about this president is that he often says what they are thinking, but sometimes lack the courage to say themselves. And I think yesterday at this podium, you heard President Trump express great frustration, perhaps even anger, with the previous administration's policies, many of which have led to the crises that our country is currently facing and that this president is focused on fixing. Thank you guys very much. Have a great weekend. We'll see you next week.